This episode of Trifles is brought to you by the BSI Press. Manuscripts, collections of papers by international writers, and books covering a wide range of other Sherlockian topics. Find them online at BakerStreetIrregulars.com. Welcome to Trifles, a weekly podcast about the Sherlock Holmes stories.
It is, of course, a trifle, but there is nothing so important as trifles.
Yes, the problem was final, the house was empty, and his bow was last, but there are so many other details to pick apart in the stories.
Pray, be precise as to details.
You know the plots, but what about the minutiae? Why would the Pope engage Sherlock Holmes' services? Why did he receive the Legion of Honor from France? And why would he refuse a knighthood?
You are very inquisitive, Mr. Holmes.
It is my business to know what other people don't know.
Scott Monty and Burt Wolder will have the answers to these questions and more in Trifles.
The game's afoot.
Episode 210, Sherlock Holmes' Birthday. Hello and Happy New Year and welcome to Trifles, the podcast where we get into the details in the Sherlock Holmes stories. I'm Scott Monty.
I'm Burt Wolder.
And happy New Year to you, Burt.
Oh, Happy New Year to you. Do you have your noisemakers put away? Do you have the confetti out of your hair?
1 out of 2. The confetti is out of my hair, which is an easy exercise these days. But my noisemaker, I'm pleased that you're joining me here on the show. So.
I always get the confetti out of my hair with my patent Revlon confetti remover.
Oh, I need to invest in one of those this year. Clearly. Yeah. There should be a lot of confetti in store. Well, break out the confetti, for it is season 5 of Trifles. We are back for a 5th season. We have no shortage of topics to cover this year. We have a new regular theme that we'll be hitting on the 3rd week of every month. Stay tuned for that. And I'm sure we will have other surprises in store for you. If you'd like to get in touch, you can email us at trifles@ihearofsherlock.com. The show notes for this episode are available at ihose.co/trifles210. And check out Patreon, where we are in full swing, and we're going to be offering a new benefit for our supporters. Every single supporter, whether you're $1 a month, $3 a month, $5, $10, whatever you decide to contribute, we will go ahead and make you a part of the Trifles community, which we are going to be setting up on Discord. It's a platform that's fairly similar to Slack, and it's designed to allow people to connect with each other. So even if we are not around, you can, as Coffee Talk says, you can talk amongst yourselves. So look forward to that. We'll be sending out an announcement about that in the future. And of course,
we're going to need to change the names. There are people listening who aren't going to know what Slack is. And so if somebody were to say to you, it's a platform Discord is a platform a lot like Slack. You would say to yourself, I don't know if that sounds good to me.
Well, that's true. A Studebaker is a car an awful lot like the Porter. I don't know if that. Yeah. Basically, these are chat apps. It's as simple as that. Rather than getting all wound up and tied up with what's going on Facebook, because people spend way too much time there. Anyway, this is a standalone. It works on the computer, it works on the phone, but it's designed to connect people like you with each other. So that's the easiest way to explain it.
Yeah, and the Porter, unlike the Studebaker, has a large headlight in the center of the front grille. So. Now you can tell these things apart.
Incidentally, if you would like to wow your friends and neighbors, if you look on the back of the $10 bill, there is a picture of the U.S. Treasury on there. Appropriate, since on the front of the $10 bill is Alexander Hamilton, the first Secretary of the Treasury. But you will note that in front of the Treasury, there is an automobile. Do you know what model automobile that is?
Ford Model T.
That's a good guess, since Ford happened to own about half of the world's cars at that time. But it is incorrect.
Oh,
it's a Hupmobile.
Hupmobile.
Hupmobile. H-U-P mobile. And
well, that's fascinating. You know, I'm just sitting here looking at my $10 bill. I happen to have one that was left to me by my father. And there's a picture of Lin-Manuel Miranda on the front.
Well, I would say that's as good as any money right about now. Well, let's talk less about cars and money and talk more about why we're here, which is Sherlock Holmes. You know, I looked through our archives. I looked through the previous 4 seasons. As we have kicked off each season, the first week of January. First of all, this is the first time we are landing on Sherlock Holmes's birthday, which is momentous. The second thing is, we've never talked about Sherlock Holmes's birthday as part of Trifles. Now, how could we have overlooked that?
Oh, that's very interesting. Well, we were just waiting for this appropriate date to come along.
I guess so. And given that this year the birthday celebrations, the BSI weekend, is happening virtually, it seemed like the natural opportunity for us to chat about Sherlock Holmes's birthday. So we, in Sherlockian circles, whether you're in the BSI or just a regular Sherlock Holmes Scion Society, typically mark Sherlock Holmes's birthday in January. More specifically, we mark it as January 6th. Now, there's nowhere in the canon that explicitly calls out January 6th as Sherlock Holmes's birthday, so we thought we'd take a little bit of time to talk about how that came to be and why it makes sense. So, where should we begin our investigation?
Well, I think we should probably begin our investigation with Christopher Morley, who gave us that date assignment. And I haven't revisited the literature to delve into this, so I'm just relying on my memory. But my memory is that Chris Morley, who was the founder of the Baker Street Irregulars and obviously one of these early enthusiasts, born in 1890, educated in Oxford, Haverford graduate, Rhodes Scholar, columnist, writer. He had a fondness for the date because it was also, I think, the date of his brother's birthday. Is that right? And it's obviously also in the ecclesiastical calendar. It's the date associated with Epiphany.
Yeah.
And one would think that Epiphany has a good deal of relativity in relationship to Sherlock Holmes, but that was really the root of it, wasn't it?
Yeah, that's exactly right. I think it was his brother Felix who had January 6th as the birthday, so Morley was already slightly inclined toward that. Interesting side note here about the Morley brothers. You mentioned Haverford. Of course, their father was a professor there, I believe. But all three Morley brothers, Christopher, Felix, and Frank, were Rhodes Scholars. Now that's amazing. It's like being a member of one of these political dynasties where one kid is a governor, another's a senator, another's a president. It's like how much more proud could you be of your kids than having 3 Rhodes Scholars in the family? It's pretty amazing.
Yeah, it is.
But yeah, Morley obviously was an Anglophile. He certainly loved Sherlock Holmes. He went on to found the Baker Street Irregulars, in addition to, scores of clubs in his lifetime, including probably what's our most favorite club of his, which is no longer extant, although we've brought it back, particularly under your aegis, Bert. The 3 Hours for Lunch Club. Yeah. And if you let us, we would sit here and regale you for 3 hours on the podcast about all of our favorite things. But this is why we've had to truncate Trifles down to about 15 to 20 minutes in each episode, so we don't bore you to death.
Although, first of all, boring you to death, I'm not prepared to take a pass at that quite yet. But, one of the things we might get is a soundtrack of just the clink of glasses, and I think that's an important part of the 3 Hours for Lunch Club.
I like that. That's a distinct possibility. I think I can make that happen.
One thing we should mention, too, is Morley's father emigrated from England.
Oh, right.
So that's another thing that was a strong connection between him and the world of Sherlock Holmes. And then if you're born in 1890, to you, the Sherlock Holmes stories and the character of Sherlock Holmes are as real and immediate as Harry Potter is for, kids who were born more recently.
Yeah, yeah. And in that spirit, people for years, when they think about their favorite literary characters, they think about their backstories. They think of the things that aren't on the written page that could add to their makeup. Everyone loves a good origin story. You look at every superhero that's come along since then. They've got an origin story. A lot of corporate stories. They take you back to the laboratory or the garage where the idea was first hatched, and people just love that, right? So it's no different with Sherlock Holmes that we saw Morley in particular leading this charge to Sherlock Holmes's origins on January 6th. Now, we'll get into the hows and the whys and the wherefores right after this quick word from our sponsor. Would you read it on a train? Would you read it in the rain? Could you read it in the car? Read it now, wherever you are. Whether on a train, in a car, in the rain, or wherever you are, Mobile Holmes is an excellent book to have with you. This volume from the BSI Press is edited by Walter Jaffe, and it takes us on a journey through Victorian transportation. From human-powered vehicles to steam-driven engines, we find examples from the Sherlock Holmes stories from land, sea, and air. Read about various modes of transport that span walking, biking, horse-drawn conveyances, locomotives, ships, boats, and submarines, zeppelins, and more. You could read this on a train. You could take it on a plane. Try Mobile Holmes in other ways. Go to BakerStreetIrregulars.com today. Okay, we are back, and it is Sherlock Holmes's birthday. And make sure you bring out your birthday hats and party favors and whatnot. So why January 6th? You mentioned the Epiphany, Bert, as, of course, which is 12th night. Now, if you know the song, The 12 Days of Christmas, technically the Christmas season is not over until January 6th, which is the Epiphany. Morley chose January 6th because supposedly, and as we count up the number of times that Sherlock Holmes quoted Shakespeare, there was only one play that he quoted from twice in the canon. In The Sign of Four, he concludes, "All's well that ends well," which is from Act 4, Scene 4 of the 12th Night. And in The Empty House, Holmes states, "Journeys end in lovers' meetings," as the old play says. And that's from Act 2, Scene 3. So two mentions of, or two quotes from Twelfth Night. That is one of the things that led Morley to say, well, Holmes had some sort of predisposition toward quoting from Twelfth Night. What could make more sense than it being his own birthday? I think that's an interesting and fun way to go about it.
Yeah. Well, beyond that, it's very instructive, and it gets us in a way to Nathan Bengus, who wrote about this in the Baker Street Journal in a seminal article called "What Was the Month" in 1957. But one of the points I wanted to underscore for our listeners is that if one of the things that happens when you're interested in Sherlock Holmes and you see things like the Baker Street Journal, you say to yourself, gee, how could I, there are some people out there who say, how do I go about that? How do I go about writing an article? I mean, so much seems to have been written. And you just mentioned a very important clue that's also evident in Nathan Bengus's essay, which is to relate linkages, find linkages in the canon between the ideas and interests that you have. And that's a great example. Morley noting Shakespeare, Twelfth Night, maybe there's a connection here. And it's what Nathan Bengus did in his essay, What Was the Month, in 1957. Now, you have to sort of look at this with a very positive eye. It's a classic essay. But the reason why I say you have to look at it with sort of a forgiving eye, perhaps better word than positive, is that it's not really the most, in terms of having an argument for January 6th, it doesn't really stand up to a lot of scrutiny. So, for example, one of the first things Nathan Bengus talks about is the Musgrave ritual. He says, one of the elements in the Musgrave ritual is this question, what was the month? And the month answer is the 6th from the 1st. Well, the 1st, the 6th, and he says, that's missing from many of the American editions. And maybe the reason that it's missing is Holmes wanted to hide his birthday. Okay, well, that's fine. And then he goes on and he says, and there's another coincidence here. Could it be just a coincidence, he says, that the murder in the Valley of Fear, I mean, if you read the text, you can come to the conclusion that the murder in the Valley of Fear took place close to midnight on January 6th.
Good Lord.
And that could have been a warning from Moriarty to Holmes. Now, see, this is really where Bengus is so clever, is finding these connections. And then he goes on and he refers to that interchange in the Final Problem, where we learn that Holmes and Moriarty actually had a dialogue, and Moriarty said to Holmes, you first crossed my path on the 4th of January. Well, Bengus says, well, that's just another example of Watson's bad handwriting. He didn't really mean the 4th of January. He meant, the 7th of January for the in reaction to this murder done on the 6th of January and so on.
The point that I like that he brings up is Holmes's demeanor on the morning of January 7th in the Valley of Fear. First of all, he's a little curt with Watson. I mean, it's in the very opening of the Valley of Fear where Watson says, I'm inclined to think, and Holmes interrupts, I should do so. Sherlock Holmes remarked impatiently. So you're seeing he wasn't even waiting for Watson to finish the sentence. He was kind of brushing him off. He was clearly a little off
grumpy
that morning. Yeah. But in addition, Watson just offhandedly remarks that Sherlock Holmes's breakfast was untouched. Mm-hmm. Now, between this disputatious beginning and lack of appetite, Bengus asserts that Holmes had a hangover. He was off his game that morning, and a hangover would explain it. And why would he have a hangover on January 7th? Well, it was just some over-jollification from the night before. Makes great sense. And why would Holmes be jollifying on January 6th? Well, you celebrate his birthday, of course. So another bit of creative triangulation by Sherlockian scholars.
Yeah, and Bengus goes on to say, and by the way, it could be also. Now, he says, I can't insist on this, but it could be also that Watson forgot to give him a birthday present. Now, I'm not going to point out the inconsistency between wanting to hide your birthday and feeling miffed that you didn't get a birthday present.
Yeah.
But that's another lovely thing that Bengus does. And then, of course, he sort of ends his essay really beautifully. He says, he talks about Epiphany and Twelfth Night and so on, but he also says January 6th is a day to conjure with. It's the natal day, the birthday of people like Carl Sandburg and Joan of Arc. And he says, is there no significance in it that Janus, the Roman god of gates and doors and all beginnings, commemorates the month after whom the master's natal month is named? What is the most famous and the most disputed door in all of London, if not the world, than 221B Baker Street? But the lovely thing, and and he goes on and he says, Janus was a two-faced divinity. Is a real vindication of my thesis. For in a deeply spiritual sense, he says, Holmes had a twofold aspect. He looks to the past and to the future. The past when we and the world were young and life was simple, and the ultimate danger was the spider in the center of a web with 1,000 radiations. And the future with its promise of greater danger, but withal if we are worthy of a better and freer world whose air will be sweeter and purer for all mankind. So he says Janus is a symbol of life everlasting. And what is more fitting than the month consecrated to him should also be the natal month of one who in the realm of the spirit is already invested with the mantle of immortality, and whom we shall ever honor and cherish as the best and wisest man we have ever known. And it's really, really is a lovely.
So looking back as we look forward, this is just a trifle.
It is, of course, a trifle, but there is nothing so important as trifles.
Please join us again next week for another installment of Trifles. Show notes are available on SherlockHolmesPodcast.com. Please subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts and be sure to check out our longer show, I Hear of Sherlock Everywhere, where we interview notable Sherlockians and share news of the Sherlockian world.
You've taken my breath away, Mr. Holmes.
Once again, Mr. Sherlock Holmes is free to devote his life to examining those interesting little problems which the complex life of London so plentifully presents. Mr. Sherlock Holmes.